I do understand that there are a lot of pediatricians, pediatric cardiologists, and other our cardiology colleagues have logged in, and my talk is going to be in general. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence and his team for arranging this meeting. This is going to be a really useful meeting. Now, what is the role of ECG in general? Throughout the world, one second, my slides are not moving.
Just click and move.
Yeah, okay. See, throughout the world, the commonest indication for doing ECG is ischemic heart disease. Arrhythmias comes next, then comes the structural heart disease. So now I am going to deal with the so-called use of ECG in pediatric structural heart diseases. So how can we go about it? See, when we read an ECG, never read the ECG in isolation. Always have the clinical background when analyzing an ECG. We should understand that for structural lesions, ECG has poor sensitivity and specificity. For example, a large VST with not much LV forces, that is, a patient can have a large VST, but ECG may not show tall QRS complexes. On the other hand, there could be large QRS in a patient with small VST or even in a normal heart. So that's the problem with the ECG in structural heart disease. Anyway, let us go through how we can use this ECG effectively. When we record the ECG in a child, the limb leads are placed more proximally to reduce the motion artifacts. A older child will be cooperative, allowing us to take the ECG, but an younger child or infant or neonate may not allow us to take a proper ECG. So we can place the limb leads more proximally so that we get an ECG without any artifacts. The usual 12-lead ECG is not enough. We should have an additional V3R or V4R. Usually the standard gain 10 millimeters per millivolt is used, but we may need to halve it if the voltages are very high. So now let us come to the normal so-called age-related changes. There are various tables for various measurements for all ages. Is there any practical utility of the table? No, the answer is no. So what I should know about the so-called age-related changes? A newborn has right axis deviation and RV dominance. This dominant R in V3R or V1 can persist just up to 6 months or can remain so up to 8 years. See the wide range. That means by 6 months that our dominant R in V1 can disappear or it can persist up to 8 years. In the majority, the R by S in V1 becomes less than 1 by 4 years. So the T wave in V3R or V1 is inverted by 5 to 6 days. That is on day 1, day 2, the T will be positive. But by 5 to 6 days, T becomes inverted in V1. And it should not become positive before 6 to 7 years. That means in the interim period, it remains inverted or negative. So after 1 week of life, if the T wave is upright, it signifies that there is right ventricular hypertrophy, even if you don't have an voltage criteria. These are all normal age-related changes. Okay. The T inversion can persist even into adolescence, what we call as juvenile persistence of T inversion. This variation also we should remember. A 16, 17-year-old boy can come with chest pain and you can find T inversion from V1 to V3. It doesn't mean abnormal. That is just the persistence of T inversion up to into the juvenile period. See, I commonly see pediatricians or pediatric cardiologists commonly finding difficulty to identify the axis. See, what is axis? It's the general or mean vector of the electrical impulses that they travel through the heart. It's the sum total of all electrical currents generated by the ventricular or atrial myocardium during depolarization. It's just a definition. I'm going to simplify how to kind of look at the axis. See, select lead 1 and AVF. Nothing else is needed. Just select lead 1 and AVF because these are the leads that are electrically perpendicular to each other. Calculate the net QRS voltage. For example, if R is taller than S, then the net voltage is positive. Like here, the R is taller than S. If S is taller than R, then the net voltage is negative. See, here is negative. Here we call it just isoelectric. Okay, just let us remember this. When I say QRS is positive, that means there is more positive R wave than the negative S wave. When I say QRS is negative, that means there is smaller R wave and a larger S wave. Now with this, what is normal? Normally both lead 1 and AVF, it is predominantly positive. So the axis is here, the left lower quadrant, it's a normal axis. Suppose If the QRS is negative in lead 1, but positive in AVF, the axis will fall here. So it is right axis deviation. So lead 1 negative, AVF positive is right axis deviation. And if lead 1 is positive, AVF is negative. AVF is negative, lead 1 is positive, the axis falls here. So it's left axis deviation. And if both are negative, this is the no man's land. So it's very simple. So take just lead 1 and AVF. If both are positive, it is normal axis. If lead 1 is positive, AVF is negative, it is left axis. Just imagine that you are holding a ribbon-like ECG. In the ribbon-like single lead ECG, you have 1, 2, 3, AVR, AVL, AVF, right? So AVF is the last lead. Lead 1 is the first lead. The lead 1 is in the left hand, AVF is in the right hand. If both are positive, it is normal. Now in the second example, lead 1 is positive. That is, my left hand is up, my right hand is down. So lead 1 is positive, AVF is negative, it's left axis deviation. Suppose my left hand is negative, that is lead 1 is negative, AVF is positive, it is right axis deviation. So it's very simple to remember. Remember left hand lead 1, right hand AVF. If both are positive, it's normal. If one is negative and one is positive, whichever is positive is that axis. My left hand is positive, it is left axis. My right hand is positive, it is right axis. If both are negative, it is northwest axis. Now, this has some importance in analyzing our structural disease also, in addition to whatever the role in arrhythmias. This is the normal newborn. Okay, normal newborn, what are things we see? We see a right axis deviation, see that AVF is positive, and we see RV dominance. This is the usual normal ECG of a normal newborn. In a 3-year-old child, the right axis deviation is almost getting to near normalcy now here. But still you can see some kind of RV dominance, okay? Now in a 5-year-old child, it's almost like an adult ECG. There is normal progression and very small R wave. The small R wave is going to further come down with time. So this is the progression of ECG changes in children. One need not remember more than this. One need not remember so many numbers in so many tables. Okay, this is enough for us for all practical purposes. So what is the importance of Q in limb leads? See, normally you will have small Q wave in limb leads if you have observed. The Q waves are normally seen in leads 2, 3 AVF in children. Please remember, I'm talking about adults. I'm not talking about adults. In children, normally the Q waves are seen in lead 2, 3 AVF. This is because of the clockwise loop of the initial QRS vector. We're not going to the theory, you can read it up. Okay. Most of the congenital diseases also have the so-called clockwise loop. So whenever I say the clockwise loop, what I mean is there is a small Q wave in 2, 3 AVF. These lesions also will have right axis deviation of the QRS. See the ECG. Now I've just magnified the first normal ECG. See the small QRS, see the small Q in lead 2, lead 3 AVF. This is normal. Unlike in adults, in children, they have small Q in 2, 3 AVF. We call this as clockwise loop. Okay. Now, what about this one? 2, 3 AVF, you don't see Q wave, but 1 and AVL, there are Q waves. So this is called as counterclockwise loop of the initial QRS. Okay. So just remember, don't go into the further mechanism. If you have Q waves in 2, 3 AVF, that is normal in a newborn. It is because of the clockwise loop of the initial QRS. If you have lead 1 and AVL showing Q waves, it is counterclockwise loop. So what are the other normal variations? Early repolarization is very common. This topic many times we have discussed. So up to 1 to 4 millimeter ST elevation can be seen. T waves are generally very tall. The ST elevation is generally concave upwards. There can be a notch at the J point. And as you can see the ECG, at times if this ECG is given to an adult physician, the first thing that will come into the mind is the ongoing or progressing acute myocardial infarction. But this kind of ECG can be commonly seen in children. See the next ECG, furthermore worrying. This ECG definitely says it's going to have MI, but actually this is a normal ECG. So we should remember that this kind of varying early repolarization are common in children, and we should have this in mind. The ST segment elevation with the terminal T inversion, as I showed in the previous ECG, also can be seen in normal children, and QT interval can be shorter than usual. So this is normal arrhythmia seen in children, that is sinus arrhythmia. It's the commonest cause of irregular heart rate. It slows in expiration and speeds up in inspiration. Now this is a 3-year-old boy referred for irregular heart rate. Leave alone other things. Just see the last See the so much of RR variation, so much of RR variation. And when you see the pulse, it will be highly irregular. You tend to diagnose atrial fibrillation, but actually it's not atrial fibrillation. It's only extreme form of sinus arrhythmia. So in sinus arrhythmia, the PP interval will vary. Correspondingly, RR interval varies. However, the PR interval is constant. Okay, see that here. PR interval is constant, but the ECG has so many variation. Now, how to know whether it's normal or abnormal? Very simple. You make the patient or make the child to exercise. Ask him to sit up for 5-10 times and then take the ECG. There will be some tachycardia. With tachycardia, this vagal response will be aborted. There will be tachycardia, but the rhythm will become very regular. So this is sinus arrhythmia is a normal finding in children. So QT interval also varies. We have to just have it in mind. So these are the other benign findings. Atrial ventricular extrasystoles. These are also abolished by exercise. So after going into some kind of normal variation, I'm going into more important things. How we are going to use the ECG for our pediatric cardiology. This is a very famous question by me put to everyone. Is this a sinus rhythm? The moment anybody sees this ECG, they'll say, yes, it is sinus rhythm. Why? Because there is P before each QRS. No, it is not the answer. Yes, there is P before each QRS. Let us go to the thing. See, in sinus rhythm, P precedes majority of QRS, need not be all QRS. Suppose somebody has 2:1 block, somebody has 3:2 conduction. That means one P will not be conducted. That means that is still sinus rhythm. Okay. And then somebody will say that PR interval is constant. That's why it is sinus rhythm. No, in Wenckebach phenomena, PR interval is not constant. Now, there is a P here prior to each QRS. How do you know that this P is coming from sinus node? That means P axis has to be normal. As we discussed in the previous slide, we discussed about how to calculate the QRS axis. Now let us see the P axis. What is the P here? P is positive here in AVF. What's the P here in lead 1? It's also positive. That means the P axis is normal. P is coming from right shoulder to the left lower limb. The P axis from the right shoulder from the left lower limb, which is the normal axis of a sinus P wave. If this is there, then you can call this a sinus rhythm. Of course, an occasional ectopic focus coming near the crista terminalis, near the sinus node can have the same normal P axis, but let's forget that. Normally, when there is a sinus beat, which is occurring from the sinus node, you should have a normal P axis. That is, P should be normal in lead 1, upright in lead 1, and P should be upright in AVF. P can be anything in lead 2 or other leads. Let us forget that. Just remember 1 and AVF. Both should be upright. It is sinus rhythm. So, P precedes majority of QRS, need not be all QRS. P is related to QRS, but PR need not be constant. But P axis has to be normal to call this a sinus rhythm. See that P axis is normal. P is positive here, P is positive here. Now what about this one? Here also there is P prior to all QRS, but this is not sinus rhythm. Here P is inverted in AVF. P is positive in lead 1. So you will immediately say that this is not sinus rhythm. Okay. There is a regular PQRS, PQRS, PQRS. There is no denial of the fact, but it is not a sinus rhythm. If you carefully observe, there is an inverted P in 2-3 AVF. That means the source of this P is from lower part of the atrium, near the coronary sinus. What we call this as a low atrial rhythm or the coronary sinus rhythm. Okay. Now, is this atrial situs normal? Somebody says, give this ECG and ask you to identify situs, whether it is situs solitus or situs inversus. You might wonder how ECG can tell situs. Whenever we tell about situs of the heart, please remember we are referring only to the atria. We are not referring to the ventricles. Ventricles do not have situs. Whenever we say refer to situs, we are referring to atria. And if right atrium is on the right side and left atrium is on the left side, then we should have the same finding. That is, P should be positive in lead 1, P should be positive in AVF. If these two are positive, that means right atrium is on the right side. That means it is situs solitus. Got the point? So when P axis is normal, it means sinus node, SA node is in the usual position. RA is on the right side. So it is situs solitus. So it's an excellent way of determining the situs solitus by the ECG. Now take this example. Now see, AVF is positive, but lead 1 is negative. Lead 1 is negative, AVF is positive. That means now the axis of the P wave is from the left shoulder to the right lower limb. AVF is positive, lead 1 is negative, so it's right axis deviation. The axis of the P wave is from the left shoulder to the right lower limb. Okay, so what is happening? It may be an ectopic rhythm arising from the left atrium, isn't it? There can be a constant source firing the left atrium and causing the rhythm, or the RA could be situated in the left side. Okay. So when you have an inverted P in lead 1, positive P in AVF, either the LA is the source of this rhythm or the RR could be situated on the left side. So this can be taken as an evidence to call this that the patient could be having situs inversus. Got the point? So if P axis is normal, it's situs saltus. If P axis is rightward, it is situs inversus. Well, let's come to the chest lead. What is happening in the chest lead? There are some T inversions. Let us forget about that. Look at the QRS. The QRS is R is V1, V2, reasonable R is there. V3 has become smaller. V4 very small. V5 is there is no R at all. Why there is no R at all? See, normally there's a progressive increase in the height of R from V1 to V6, isn't it? The V1 to V6, the heart keeps on progressing. The R keeps on increasing. This is because of the ventricular mass on the left side, because of the levocardia. Now, suppose that particular child is not having the ventricular mass on the left side, then there won't be any progression of the QRS. Okay. So if this is absent, if the normal progression of the R height is absent, it might mean that the ventricular mass is not in the left side. That means when you have this finding, this could mean either mesocardia or dextrocardia. So got the point? So let us just go through this ECG again. You can see that inverted P in lead 1, positive P in AVF. So it is situs inversus. There is no progression of the R wave. So it is situs inversus dextrocardia. Okay. The same patient, when you put the leads on the right side, what is happening? You can see the progression of the R wave because there is more heart on the right side. So there is progression of the R wave. So situs identification, that means situs solitus means normal P axis. Situs inversus means right axis deviation of P wave. In levocardia, you have normal progression of QRS from V1 to V6. And in dextrocardia, there is non-progression of QRS. This is very useful for us to kind of based on ECG to see the location of the atria and the ventricles. Now, all newborns would have right ventricular hypertrophy. Then how do we diagnose that it is a pathological hypertrophy of a diseased heart? This is a common question to come to mind, isn't it? So the RVH is pathological if there is extreme right axis, if there is upright T in V1, if there is monophasic R in V1 and RV strain pattern is there. Okay. If these things are there, then the RVH, whatever is we are recording the ECG is probably pathological. So this child had a 4-day-old child with cyanosis, and you can see there is right axis deviation and see monophasic R in V1. Actually, this child had primary pulmonary hypertension. Just to give an example of how to diagnose an abnormal R in V1. Okay. Now, do we have any diagnostic ECGs? Okay. So initially I said how to interpret the ECG basically, and I told you the usage of ECG in diagnosing the sinus rhythm, and hence its usefulness in identifying situs and levocardia, dextrocardia. Now, do we have any diagnostic ECGs in pediatric cardiology? Very, very few. I'm going to tell them first before going to the others. Now, take this ECG first. A 50-day-old child, cyanosed, single second sound, and there is ejection murmur at the pulmonary area. Now, let us come to the QRS axis. Normally, what I expect is a right axis deviation. It is left axis deviation, so it's abnormal. Okay. Now, I am seeing a Brown and Peter in 2-3 AF, suggestive of right atrial enlargement. Okay. Second positive finding. What I told earlier, normally Q waves are seen in 2-3 AVF. Here, Q waves are seen in 1 and AVL. That means there is counterclockwise loop. And in addition, in V1 and V2, V3, there is no R at all. That means there is no RV dominance at all. Totally RV has regressed. So if you combine all these things, absence of right ventricular forces, left axis deviation, counterclockwise loop. If these three things are there, it's very, very specific for the diagnosis called tricuspid atresia. Okay, please have it in mind. This is a very specific finding. So when do we say it is counterclockwise loop? There is Q in 1 and AVL. This counterclockwise loop is seen in tricuspid atresia, AV canal defect, inlet VSD, some forms of DORV, in some peripheral PS of congenital rubella syndrome. I think you can forget about the last two. You can just maybe have it in the corner of your mind. But these two things remember: tricuspid atresia, AV canal defect, and inlet VSDs. And most of the time, whenever you have counterclockwise loop, you will also have left axis deviation of the QRS. Now let's go to another example. Here again, there is left axis deviation. Here again, you have counterclockwise loop. Q waves are seen in 1 and AVL. But you see both RV and LV dominance. Previous case, there was no RV dominance. Here's both RV and LV dominance. 6 weeks old child with mild distress. That means this child is having distress. There is feature of biventricular hypertrophy, meaning thereby there could be some post-tricuspid shunt. When clinically there is some post-tricuspid shunt, with that, if there is this counterclockwise loop and left axis deviation, it's very specific for the diagnosis of complete AV canal defect. You know, this cannot be a simple VSD, this cannot be a simple PDA, this cannot be simple AP window. Because of the left axis deviation and counterclockwise loop, it's more in favor of complete AV canal defect. Now, what about this ECG? This ECG also showing left axis deviation. There are Q waves in 1 and AVL, but there is no biventricular features. Actually, the RV features are not there. So, if you ask me, can this be tricuspid atresia? Yes, probably tricuspid atresia is very much possible. But in tricuspid atresia, I expected that there will be a prominent P wave here, which is not there. Absence of prominent P wave in a ECG, which is otherwise looking like a tricuspid atresia, could mean that it's an unbalanced AV canal defect. Okay, I hope you understand the background, whatever the technicality, whatever I'm saying. Not to memorize the facts, just understand what is happening. ECG is just expressing what is inside the heart. Okay, so this is a child of known case of large VSD. So I already given it as a case of large VSD. In large VSD, what we expect, the usual clockwise loop of 2-3 AVF. This we expect a usual Q waves in 2-3 AVF. But here what we have seen, small Q wave in 1 and AVF. So in a case with large VSD, if you see a small Q in 1 and AVF suggests you have counterclockwise loop, you should seriously suspect there is inlet extension of the perimembranous VSD or muscular VSD or whatever you are talking about. So if you have not done that, after seeing ECG, you please go back and then look at the echo again. You might find that there could be some inlet extension. So this is the usefulness of finding Q waves in 1 and AVL. So these changes, whatever I have said, are very specific. Okay. So other lesion specific changes, like if there is Q in V1, normally you don't have Q in V1, right? If there is Q in V1, but absence of Q in V5, V6, it suggests you have corrected transposition of great arteries. Though I have mentioned this, even in transposition of great arteries, I am not getting such a kind of classical ECG changes. In an ECG, if you find AV blocks, it suggests you have endocardial quiescent defect or corrected transposition of great arteries. See, this is the ECG of corrected transposition of great arteries. There is a Q wave in V1, V2, but there are no Q waves in V5, V6.